Up funds for his border wall for about an hour. Entertaining, to say the least, at times, but it was it was as expected. He said everybody have a good life there at the end, so that's something. Okay, Wendy Patrick is joining us. Let's get to if we could just focus on the whole point of this Rose Garden meeting. The declaration, as expected, what do you think?
Well, as expected, given the amount of time that was dedicated to discussing the declaration, he hit a lot of other topics and actually took a lot of other questions on different topics. But with respect to the declaration itself, we would have liked to have heard more details of exactly where he's going to get that money from and whether or not that money is freed up. You heard him say a couple of times, I've got plenty of money to do it. We know from behind the scenes, we know there's several different areas. We know there's counter-narcotics investigations that has money. We know we can take some from military. He's talked about diverting some from national disaster funds. But those are all very controversial because we don't want those funds to lose the money. And
one of the reporters asked about that, and he did say that it would be a very small amount that would come from military and tech and that kind of stuff. But even a small amount would be perhaps detrimental.
You know, and that's the danger, and that's what everybody was worried about. And he did make the argument that many have said he was going to make, that Nancy Pelosi said not $1, and now he's got $1.4 billion. But that's nowhere near the $8 billion he wants to have when he allocates the funds from these other places. But that's easier said than done. And obviously he knows he's going to be going to court over this, not over whether he has the authority to declare a national emergency, but almost over whether this is the correct rationale under which to declare a national emergency.
I think at one point he said, sadly, we will be sued. Sadly, it will go through the process, and happily, we will win. That's what he said at one point. I'd be curious, though, Wendy, as they go back and they time this, because, I mean, as Raul just mentioned, it was pretty much a good hour that we've been listening to him. I mean, it was probably just a few minutes that he spent talking about the border wall. Everything else, North Korea, China, everything that else that he's done. Is that what we were expecting, the American people wanted to hear?
Well, that's not what the American people wanted to hear. Everybody was concerned probably about where these funds going to come from. But what he really did is set the table, as he likes to say, for justifying why he needed to do what he did. A lot of what he talked about this morning was some of his accomplishments, the rationale behind why we need tough border security, but that's not really the issue. Nobody doubts or debates even that we need tough border security. They debate whether or not we need this much money for a wall. That's the partisan debate, I should say. So that's why he probably spent so much time talking. The other reason, of course, as we know, is he got off message. And he decided to, you know, talk a little bit about the things where he's most comfortable. I've long said, when he's out of his element, he likes to return to topics that he's comfortable discussing. And he did that for most of the time this morning. Although he did hit the national emergency, the rationale, and a little bit about where the money's going to come from, although we want to hear much more about that.
There are so many specifics that need to be addressed here. And he was talking about Prime Minister Abe putting him up for a peace prize and talking about all this other stuff, the stock market. He used the word invasion a lot. We've heard this, an invasion of our country, an invasion of drugs, invasion of criminals. One of the reporters pressed him on, where are you getting your statistics for this? Because the DEA says one thing, and then the president said, well, Homeland Security. But the DEA is part of the federal government. He says your own government is saying one thing. Where do we get the clarification for this?
The clarification usually comes from several different places. Statistics can be tricky in that you may have different agencies coming up with different ones, but when everyone agrees on certain statistics and the president does not, that's where he's gotten a lot of bad press for, well, why is it that you don't trust these statistics? He really has come around and he surrounds himself the best he can with people that are smarter than he is about some of these issues. And there are issues, obviously we know that the border crossings are down. He attributes that to his strong national security and part of what the administration is imposing. Democrats attribute that to the fact that it's been down for a while. Be that as it may, with the migrant caravans and all the rest of what we've seen in the last 6 months to a year, that's where he came up with this invasion language, and he has a lot of support for that. But again, that doesn't necessarily translate into, is a wall the only solution? Are there other ways that we can secure our border other than having a wall? Obviously, terrain doesn't lend itself to a wall in many of these places. Isn't there a way we can compromise on this?
We could talk about this for a while.
We can.
The president, in his words, said this is a great thing to do, and he said this is a very good emergency.
You've got your accent down, by the way, the Saturday Night Live accent. That's good.
We'll see what comes of this, because I think a lot of people argue that it's about the optics of this to the voter base for Trump, that he said, look, he made this promise, he wants to stick to this promise. no matter who or what gets in his way, be it his own party, be it statistics and things that don't make sense.
Where there's a will, there's a wall. That's what the president seems to be saying, right?
Wendy Patrick. We'll end it on that. Thank you so much. Wendy, thank you for hanging out. We appreciate
Always
appreciate
a pleasure.
it.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
All right, 8:35. Let's get you over to Chrissy for a check.